Amy Reed pressed her face against the observation window as the colony ship New Dawn descended through wispy clouds toward the surface of Proxima Centauri b. The planet below looked like Earth's twin sister, with vast green forests stretching toward purple mountains and crystal-clear rivers snaking through valleys that seemed too perfect to be real. After 200 years of space travel, humanity had finally found a new home. The colonists had prepared for hostile environments, dangerous predators, or even intelligent alien species. But what they discovered was far stranger than anyone could have imagined. Amy's 8-year-old daughter Lucy bounced excitedly beside her, pressing her small hands against the cold metal of the window. "Mom, look at all those colors," Lucy whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. The forests below shimmered with hues that had no names in human language, shifting from emerald to sapphire to gold as the ship's shadow passed over them. The landing went smoothly, and within hours, the first temporary shelters were erected near a flowing stream. Amy, being the colony's lead biologist, was among the first to venture into the alien wilderness with her survey team. The air tasted sweet, almost floral, and the gravity felt just light enough to make every step feel like a small bounce. "Stay close to the camp, Lucy," Amy called over her shoulder as she headed toward the tree line. Her daughter nodded, but was already distracted by something glittering. In the nearby undergrowth, Lucy had always been drawn to unusual creatures. Collecting earth insects and small animals since she could walk Amy's team, had been exploring for barely an hour when she heard a soft chirping sound coming from beneath a cluster of silver-leafed bushes. Parting the branches carefully, she gasped at what she found. A creature no larger than a house cat sat perched on a fallen log, but it looked like something from ancient mythology. The little being had iridescent scales that shifted from deep blue to brilliant gold in the sunlight, tiny wings that fluttered nervously as Amy approached, and large, intelligent eyes that seemed far too knowing for such a small creature. Its head was elongated like a miniature dragon from children's stories, complete with small horns and delicate whiskers that twitched as it studied her. "Hello there, little one," Amy whispered, extending her hand slowly. The creature tilted its head, made a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, then spread its wings and fluttered to land on her outstretched palm. Its feet were warm against her skin, and she could feel its tiny heart beating rapidly with excitement. Meanwhile, back at the camp, Lucy had made her own discovery. While chasing what she thought was a butterfly with wings like stained glass, she had stumbled upon something even more extraordinary. Crouched behind a boulder was what appeared to be a cat, but unlike any cat that had ever existed on Earth, this alien feline was roughly the size of a bobcat, but seemed to be made of living starlight. Its fur shifted colors constantly, cycling through silver, purple, and deep blue, and occasionally the entire creature would become translucent, as if it were not entirely solid. Most remarkably, it had 6 legs instead of 4, each ending in paws that seemed to barely touch. "The ground here, kitty," Lucy called softly, approaching with the same fearless curiosity that often worried her mother. The creature's ears perked up, and it turned to look at her with eyes that held depths like looking into space itself. Instead of running away, it seemed to be waiting for something. Lucy sat down cross-legged in front of the alien cat and extended her hand. The creature sniffed cautiously, then rubbed against her palm with a purr that sounded like distant music. "You're beautiful," Lucy whispered, gently stroking the creature's constantly shifting fur. That's when Amy returned to camp, carrying the small dragon-like creature in her arms. Both mother and daughter stared at each other's discoveries in amazement. "Mom, look what I found," Lucy said excitedly. "It's like a space cat." "And I found what looks like a baby dragon," Amy replied, showing Lucy the scaled creature that was now curled contentedly in her hands. The 2 alien animals looked at each other across the small clearing, and something electric seemed to pass between them. The dragon creature suddenly perked up, its wings fluttering with excitement. It chirped loudly and leaped from Amy's hands, landing gracefully on the ground. The alien cat immediately stood up, its fur rippling with waves of bright color, and began to back away slowly. "I think they want to play," Lucy said, clapping her hands together. But what happened next was unlike any play either human had ever witnessed. The baby dragon began to chase the cat, but not in the way a dog might chase a squirrel. Instead, the dragon moved with purpose, following specific patterns, while the cat seemed to be leading it somewhere rather than simply running away. They moved in complex spirals and figure-8 patterns, the dragon chirping in what sounded like a musical code, while the cat responded with harmonious purrs. Other colonists began to gather as the strange chase continued through the camp. The two creatures moved with increasing speed and complexity, creating intricate paths between the shelters and equipment. What had started as apparent play was becoming something much more elaborate and intentional. "This doesn't look random," Amy muttered, pulling out her data recorder to capture the creatures' movements. The patterns they were creating reminded her of something, though she couldn't quite place what. As the chase intensified, the dragon's chirping grew louder and more complex, almost like it was sending out a signal. The alien cat suddenly stopped at the edge of the camp and turned to face the forest. Its fur began to glow with an inner light, and for a moment, both creatures stood perfectly still. That's when the forest began to respond. Light started flickering deep within the trees, at first just a few scattered points of illumination, then more and more until the entire woodland seemed to be awakening. The colonists watched in growing alarm as the lights began to pulse in rhythm with the dragon's chirping. "Amy, get Lucy inside one of the shelters," Captain Walsh ordered, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. But the little girl was mesmerized by the light display, and the dragon creature had moved to sit beside her, as if protecting her from some unseen danger. The alien cat suddenly made a sound like crystal bells ringing, and the lights in the forest began to move. They weren't just random illumination. They were structured, organized, purposeful. Something vast and intelligent was responding to the creature's elaborate chase. "What have we stumbled into?" Amy whispered, pulling Lucy closer, while keeping her eyes on the growing light display that was spreading throughout the alien wilderness. The baby dragon looked up at Lucy with its large, knowing eyes and made a soft sound that almost sounded like an apology. The alien cat padded over to Amy and began to rub against her legs, purring that musical sound, as if trying to communicate something important. As the lights in the forest grew brighter and began to take on geometric patterns, Amy realized with growing dread that the innocent chase between two alien creatures had triggered something far beyond human understanding. The last thing she recorded in her data log before the real terror began was a simple observation. The chase was never random, it was a message, and something out there has been waiting to hear it. The alien cat's musical purring grew louder as it began walking toward the forest, looking back at Lucy and the dragon creature with eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. Lucy, despite her mother's protests, felt drawn to follow, and the baby dragon fluttered alongside her with increasing excitement. "Lucy?" "No," Amy called, but her daughter was already walking after the strange feline, mesmerized by its shifting colors and the way it seemed to float rather than walk. The dragon creature stayed close to Lucy's shoulder, occasionally nuzzling against her cheek with what seemed like affection mixed with urgency as they moved deeper into the trees. Following paths that seemed to appear just ahead of their feet, the lights in the forest grew brighter and more organized. Amy followed reluctantly, her scientific curiosity warring with maternal fear. Captain Walsh and several other colonists trailed behind, weapons ready but unsure what they might be facing. The alien cat led them to a clearing where the ground felt different beneath their feet. Instead of soft earth and alien grass, there was something hard and smooth like polished stone. As their eyes adjusted to the strange forest lighting, they realized they were standing on top of something massive buried just beneath a thin layer of soil and vegetation. "Everyone, step back slowly," Captain Walsh commanded. But before anyone could move, the alien cat sat down in the center of the clearing and began to sing. The sound was unlike anything humans had ever heard, part mechanical hum and part organic melody, rising and falling in complex harmonies. The dragon creature immediately responded, adding its own voice to the song. Its chirping became more sophisticated, more musical, blending with the cat's melody to create something that resonated through the ground beneath their feet. That's when the earth began to glow. What the colonists had taken for natural ground was revealed to be a vast crystalline structure, easily the size of a city block, buried just below the surface. As the two creatures continued their duet, the crystal began to pulse with inner light, revealing intricate patterns and symbols that seemed to move and shift within its depths. "It's not a building," Amy whispered in amazement, kneeling to touch the warm surface. "It's alive, or at least it was designed to mimic life." The singing stopped abruptly, and both creatures looked toward the center of the crystalline surface. A section of the structure began to rise, forming steps that led to an opening that hadn't existed moments before. The alien cat padded toward the entrance while the dragon fluttered around Lucy's head, making encouraging sounds. "We're not going in there," Captain Walsh said firmly, but Lucy was already walking toward the steps, drawn by something she couldn't explain. The dragon creature perched on her shoulder, and together they descended into the glowing interior of the ancient structure. Amy followed immediately, unable to let her daughter face the unknown alone. Inside, the walls pulsed with soft light and the air hummed with energy that made their skin tingle. The space was vast, with corridors stretching in directions that seemed to defy the structure's external dimensions. The alien cat led them through passages lined with symbols that shifted and changed as they watched, until they reached a central chamber dominated by what could only be described as a living computer. Organic-looking components mixed with crystalline structures, all pulsing with the same rhythm as a heartbeat. "Welcome, young species," a voice said, though it seemed to come from everywhere at once rather than any particular source. The words were in perfect English, but underneath them was something else, as if the meaning was being translated directly into their minds. Lucy reached out to touch the dragon creature, which had grown noticeably larger since entering the structure. "Are you okay, little friend?" she asked, but the dragon was no longer little. It had doubled in size, and its scales now glowed with the same inner light as the crystal walls. "The one you call dragon is not what your species believes," the voice continued. "It is a sentinel, created by the architects who built this facility eons ago. The one you call cat is a probe, designed to evaluate new species for worthiness." Amy stepped protectively in front of Lucy as the implications hit her. "Worthiness for what?" "To inherit the galaxy and carry on the mission of the architects," the voice replied. "Your species was tested by the interaction between Sentinel and Probe. The chase you witnessed was an ancient protocol, designed to measure intelligence, cooperation, and understanding. The dragon, now clearly revealed as something far more complex than a simple alien animal, moved closer to Lucy, but its behavior remained gentle and protective. The alien cat had positioned itself near Amy, its fur cycling through colors that seemed to indicate different emotional states. "Your species failed the test," the voice announced with what sounded like regret. "You saw predator and prey where you should have seen cooperation. You sought to domesticate rather than understand. This failure triggers the next phase of the architect's protocol." Throughout the galaxy, similar crystalline structures began awakening on every world where humans had established colonies or outposts. Ancient systems that had slept for millions of years stirred to life, receiving the signal that a new species had been evaluated and found wanting. "What happens now?" Captain Walsh demanded, having followed them into the chamber with several armed colonists. "The defense protocol activates," the voice replied. "Automated. Systems will ensure that unworthy species do not spread their influence further into the galaxy. It is not cruelty, merely necessity. The architects learned that allowing unworthy species to flourish leads to catastrophic consequences, but something unexpected was happening. The dragon creature, despite its apparent programming, remained close to Lucy, making soft protective sounds whenever she seemed frightened. Its loyalty appeared to be overriding whatever commands it should have been receiving. "This is unprecedented," the voice said, and for the first time it sounded confused. "The Sentinel shows attachment to an individual from the tested species. This behavior was not programmed into its matrix." Amy watched as her daughter gently stroked the dragon's scales, completely unafraid despite the creature's increasing size and obvious power. "Maybe that's what your test missed," Amy said to the ancient intelligence. "Maybe the ability to form bonds across species barriers is exactly what makes us worthy." The alien cat began purring again, but this time the sound seemed different, less like communication and more like genuine contentment. It had curled up next to Amy's feet, displaying behavior that seemed more affectionate than evaluative. The probe also exhibits anomalous behavior, the voice admitted. Both constructs are deviating from their core programming in ways the architects never anticipated. Across human space, similar scenes were playing out wherever sentinels and probes had made contact with colonists. Instead of acting as impartial judges, the alien creatures were forming emotional attachments to their human companions, creating cascade failures. In the ancient evaluation network, the defense systems are already activating, the voice warned. Massive architect vessels emerge from hidden installations throughout your species' territory. They will destroy human colonies to prevent further contamination of their carefully maintained galactic order. Lucy looked up at the dragon creature, which had now grown to the size of a horse but still nuzzled against her hand with gentle affection. "You don't want to hurt us, do you?" she asked. The dragon made a sound that was unmistakably negative, almost like it was saying no. Then, it turned toward the pulsing walls of the chamber and began to sing again, but this time its song was different. Instead of the harmonious duet with the alien cat, it was creating a discord, a rejection of whatever signals it was receiving. "The Sentinel refuses its programming," the voice said, and there was something, like panic in its tone. This level of system failure was never anticipated. The architect's network cannot process creatures that choose loyalty over duty. The alien cat joined the dragon's rebellious song, adding its own voice to what was becoming a galaxy-wide rejection of the ancient protocols. As their defiant harmony echoed through the crystalline chamber, similar songs began rising from human colonies across space, as other sentinels and probes chose their human companions over their original purpose. "You may have started something that will change everything," Amy told the ancient intelligence. "The question is whether that change comes in time to save anyone from your defense systems." Outside the crystal structure, the forest lights were going wild, pulsing erratically as the ancient network struggled to process the unprecedented rebellion of its own creations. The first phase of humanity's real test was only beginning. Emergency alarms blared across the human colony of New Berlin, as massive shadows fell over the settlement from above. The colonists looked up in terror to see ships, unlike anything in human experience, descending through the atmosphere, their hulls seeming to bend light around them like liquid metal. Given Form Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the colony's communications center, desperately trying to contact other human settlements across the galaxy. The responses she received painted a terrifying picture. Similar ships had appeared over every major human colony simultaneously, and several smaller outposts had already gone dark. "It's coordinated," she reported to the Emergency Council. "Whatever these things are, they're hitting us everywhere at once." Earth Command estimates were facing at least 200 hostile vessels across 37 systems. But on Proxima Centauri B, something different was happening. Lucy's dragon, now grown to nearly full adult size, had positioned itself protectively over the small human settlement. Its scales blazed, with defiant light as it stared up at the descending architect vessel, and its voice had changed from musical chirping to something that sounded almost like a war cry. The alien cat had undergone its own transformation. No longer translucent and ethereal, it had taken on a more solid form, with armor-like patches. Across its fur and eyes that glowed with tactical intelligence, it moved through the human camp with purposeful efficiency, as if coordinating defenses. "The constructs are protecting you," the ancient voice from the crystal structure observed with obvious confusion. "This behavior contradicts every parameter in their original programming. The architects never designed them to defend failed species." Amy held Lucy close as the architect ship settled into a hovering position above the colony. The vessel was enormous, easily 2 kilometers long, and covered in the same crystalline patterns they had seen in the buried structure. But instead of the warm glow they had experienced underground, this crystal pulsed with cold, analytical light. "Maybe your architects were wrong about what makes a species worthy," Amy called out to the ancient intelligence. "Maybe the ability to inspire loyalty across species barriers is exactly what the galaxy needs." The dragon creature spread its wings, which had grown to impressive proportions, and launched itself toward the hovering ship. But instead of attacking, it began to circle the vessel while singing the same rebellious song they had heard in the crystal chamber. Its voice carried across the settlement and into the forest, where other sounds began to respond from hidden locations throughout the alien wilderness. More dragons began to appear. They were fully grown sentinels that had been dormant for millennia, awakening to join their younger companions' defiant chorus. Soon the air was filled with dozens of massive winged creatures, all singing in harmony while circling the architect vessel. "The dormant sentinels are activating without authorization," the voice reported with something approaching panic. "The network is experiencing cascade failures across multiple systems." Similar scenes were playing out on human colonies throughout the galaxy. As architect ships arrived to begin their systematic destruction of human civilization, the sentinels and probes that had bonded with colonists began awakening their dormant companions, creating spontaneous rebel networks that the ancient AI systems couldn't control or understand. On the farming colony of Haven's Rest, a probe that had bonded with an elderly human farmer began transmitting override codes to the approaching architect vessel. The ship's weapons systems faltered as its own Sentinel crew started questioning their targeting orders. Commander Sarah Mitchell received an encrypted transmission from Earth that made her hands tremble as she read it. "Multiple architect vessels report internal conflicts. Their crews appear to be malfunctioning. Some ships are returning to unknown positions without completing their missions." Back on Proxima Centauri B, the standoff between dragons and the architect ship was reaching a critical point. The vessel had stopped its descent but made no move to attack. Through the colony's communication equipment, which had somehow been enhanced by the alien cat's presence, they could hear fragments of heated debate in a language that hurt human ears. "The ship's crew is arguing," Amy realized. "They're not all in agreement about what to do with us." Lucy looked up at her dragon companion, which had grown almost too large for her to touch easily. "What do you want to tell them?" she asked the creature. The dragon lowered its massive head so Lucy could place her small hands on its snout. As soon as she made contact, her eyes went wide with understanding. "They're not evil," she announced to the assembled colonists. "They're scared. The architects made them to protect the galaxy from something terrible. But they've been alone for so long they forgot how to tell the difference between threats and friends." The alien cat approached Captain Walsh and began displaying holographic images in the air above its body. The images showed space battles between recognizable architect vessels and something else. Massive, organic-looking ships that seemed to consume everything they encountered. "The Devourers," the ancient voice whispered with unmistakable fear. "The reason the architects created the testing protocol, a species that consumes entire civilizations and leaves nothing behind. They were the ultimate threat the architects fled from." More images appeared in the alien cat's holographic display. Civilizations being stripped bare, entire star systems going dark, and most terrifying of all, the approaching edge of a massive dark zone in space where the Devourers had already passed through. "They're coming back," Amy breathed, understanding the true scope of the crisis. The architects weren't trying to control the galaxy for conquest. They were trying to prepare it for war. The dragon above them suddenly changed its song, and the architect ship responded by extending what appeared to be a docking bridge toward the colony. Instead of weapons, the vessel was offering communication. The ship's commander requests direct contact. The alien cat somehow conveyed through its holographic displays. "The situation has become too complex for automated responses." Figure emerged from the architect ship that defied human expectations. Instead of some alien intelligence, what approached the colony looked remarkably human-like, though taller and with skin that held the same crystalline patterns they had. "Seen throughout architect technology, I am Navigator Prime," the figure announced in perfect English. I was human once, like you. The architects preserved my consciousness and those of others who proved worthy in previous tests. We are the crews of their vessels. The revelation hit the colonists like a physical blow. The architect ships weren't crewed by aliens, but by the consciousnesses of humans and other species who had passed the ancient tests over millions of years. Your species presents an unprecedented situation. Navigator Prime continued. You failed the formal test, but you've achieved something. No previous species has managed. You've inspired our sentinels and probes to rebellion. This suggests capabilities that our testing protocols never anticipated. Lucy stepped forward, her dragon companion lowering its wings so she could climb onto its back. Maybe the test is wrong, she said with the simple clarity that only children possess. Maybe instead of looking for species that can follow rules, you should be looking for species that can make better rules. Navigator Prime studied the small human girl riding a creature that had been designed to judge her species and find them wanting. The Devourers approached the galaxy's edge. We estimate perhaps 50 years before they reach the core systems. If your species could truly unite the galaxy as our data suggests, you might represent our best hope for survival. But the defense protocol has already been triggered, the ancient voice interrupted. Hundreds of ships are moving to eliminate human colonies. The network cannot simply reverse a galaxy-wide extermination order. The alien cat began projecting new images. Architect ships throughout human space being surrounded by rebellious sentinels and probes, their crews refusing to carry out their orders, and human colonists working alongside their alien companions to disable weapons systems. It appears the choice may no longer be ours to make, Navigator Prime observed. Your species has already begun changing everything simply by being yourselves. The question now is whether that change can happen fast enough to prepare for what's coming. As if summoned by his words, the dragon carrying Lucy spread its wings and began to glow with an inner light that matched the crystal structures. Around the galaxy, similar lights were beginning to shine from every world where humans had formed bonds with the architects, creatures creating a network of rebellion that was reshaping the ancient order from within. The massive fleet of human and architect vessels moved through hyperspace toward the galactic core, their hulls gleaming with the same crystalline patterns that had once marked them as enemies. Lucy, now 12 years old after 3 years of preparation, sat in the command chamber of the flagship alongside her dragon companion, which had grown to magnificent proportions, but remained as gentle with her as the day they first met. Navigator Prime stood before a holographic display showing their destination, a massive structure at the galaxy's heart that dwarfed even the largest planets. The central archive, he explained to the assembled human and architect commanders. Every piece of information the architects gathered over millions of years is stored there, including the complete record of the Devourer threat, Captain Walsh now bearing the rank of Admiral, after humanity's rapid integration into the Galactic Defense Network, studied the approaching structure with growing amazement. It wasn't built around a star. It was built from a star, with the entire stellar mass converted into crystalline computing matrix that pulsed with the rhythm of cosmic heartbeat. The architects didn't just flee from the Devourers. Navigator Prime continued as they drew closer. They spent eons preparing for their return. Every test, every evaluation, every species they judged was part of building a database of genetic and cultural information to find the perfect defenders. Amy, now serving as humanity's chief xenobiologist, watched as her daughter communicated silently with the dragon through touch. The bond between them had evolved far beyond simple friendship into something that allowed them to share thoughts and emotions across species barriers. Similar bonds had formed between humans and architect creatures throughout the fleet, creating a level of coordination that amazed even the ancient AI systems. What we're about to show you will change your understanding of everything, Navigator Prime warned as their ship approached a docking port that appeared in the archive's surface. The truth about the architects, about the tests, and about why your species represents something completely unexpected. The interior of the archive defied comprehension. Vast chambers stretched beyond the horizon, filled with crystalline matrices that held the memories and knowledge of countless civilizations. But what struck the human visitors most profoundly was the presence of beings that looked unmistakably familiar. "Those are humans," Lucy whispered, pointing to figures moving through the crystal gardens. But they were humans who had lived and died millions of years ago, their consciousnesses preserved in the archive's infinite memory banks. The architects were not an alien species. Navigator, Prime revealed as they walked through galleries filled with the preserved knowledge of 1,000 worlds. They were the first intelligent species to encounter the Devourers and survive. They were from a world much like your Earth, and they looked very much like you. The revelation sent shockwaves through the human delegation. The beings they had thought of as ancient aliens were actually their own distant ancestors, evolved and enhanced by technology beyond current understanding, but recognizably human in their origins. When the Devourers first emerged from the void between galaxies, the architects tried to fight them using conventional warfare, Navigator Prime explained, leading them to a chamber where holographic displays showed massive space battles. They lost 90% of their civilization in the first encounter. What remained fled to this galaxy and began the long preparation for the Devourers' inevitable return. The displays showed the architects' desperate search for species that could succeed where they had failed. They tested countless civilizations, over millions of years, looking for the specific combination of traits that might stand against the ultimate predators. Intelligence alone wasn't enough. Navigator Prime continued. The Devourers could match or exceed any level of technological sophistication. Aggression failed because the Devourers fed on conflict and grew stronger from it. Even perfect cooperation wasn't sufficient because the Devourers could corrupt unified minds. Amy studied the tactical displays with growing understanding. You were looking for something that could adapt and evolve during the conflict itself, she realized. Something that could change the rules of engagement in ways the Devourers couldn't predict or counter. Precisely, Navigator Prime confirmed. And that's where your species proved unique. The ability to form emotional bonds across species barriers, to inspire loyalty that transcends programming, to adapt social structures in real time. These are traits the Devourers have never encountered. Lucy's dragon companion began displaying its own holographic images, drawn from the genetic memories that had been unlocked by their bond. The images showed the true nature of the Devourers, not just a conquering species, but something far more terrifying. They're not alive in any sense we understand. Lucy translated from her dragon's memories. They're like a cosmic infection that spreads by consuming the complexity of living systems. They don't just destroy civilizations, they absorb their patterns and use them to become more efficient predators. The archive's central chamber contained the most disturbing revelation of all, a real-time display showing the edge of the galaxy, where the Devourer fleet had begun, to probe the outer systems. The enemy wasn't a traditional invasion force, but something that resembled a living storm, converting matter and energy into more copies of itself as it advanced. They've grown stronger since the architects first encountered them, Navigator Prime admitted with obvious fear. They've consumed dozens of galaxies in the intervening. Our original estimates of 50 years were optimistic. They'll reach the core systems within 20. But the human delegation was studying the Devourer advance patterns with fresh eyes. Where the architects saw overwhelming force, humans saw something else entirely. They move like a plague, Admiral Walsh observed. But plagues have weaknesses. They depend on finding suitable hosts, and they can be disrupted by unexpected immune responses. Amy was running calculations on her portable computer, comparing Devourer movement patterns with biological infection models. They're attracted to complexity and organization, she announced. They seek out the most advanced civilizations first, because those provide the richest feeding grounds. That's why the architect's strategy of preserving advanced species in hidden locations has worked for so long. Navigator Prime agreed. But it also means that any major civilization will draw them like a beacon. Lucy looked up from where she had been, communing with her dragon companion. What if we don't hide from them, she suggested with the directness that had become her trademark. What if we give them something they've never encountered before? such as Navigator Prime asked, though his expression suggested he was already beginning to understand. A galaxy where every species is connected to every other species through bonds they can't break or corrupt, Lucy replied. Where destroying one part makes the whole system stronger, not weaker. The dragon beside her began projecting new images. Human colonies working alongside architect crews, sentinel dragons serving as living communication networks between worlds, and probe cats coordinating defensive strategies across multiple star systems simultaneously. The bonds your species forms aren't just emotional. Navigator Prime realized with growing excitement, they're creating a new kind of collective intelligence that maintains individual identity while sharing resources and capabilities. Amy nodded as the implications became clear. The Devourers consume complexity by breaking down organized systems into chaos. But what if the system becomes more organized in response to damage rather than less? Throughout the archive, ancient AI systems began processing this new paradigm. Instead of hiding from the Devourers or meeting them with conventional force, the galaxy could present them with something that violated their fundamental assumptions about how living systems operated. It's never been attempted, Navigator Prime warned. The level of coordination required would mean connecting every inhabited world in the galaxy through the bond networks your species has been creating. Lucy's dragon spread its wings and began to sing. And throughout the archive, other sentinels and probes began responding. The sound built into a harmony that resonated through the crystalline structure, carrying with it the promise of something the galaxy had never seen. Unity without uniformity, strength through diversity, and the kind of adaptive resilience that could evolve faster than any predator could consume it. The Devourers will be here in 20 years, Admiral Walsh said grimly. Can we really connect an entire galaxy in that time? We don't have a choice, Amy replied, watching as her daughter and the dragon began coordinating with the archive systems to plan the greatest logistical challenge in galactic history. Because if we can't, there won't be a galaxy left to save. The edge of the galaxy burned with unnatural fire as the Devourer swarm finally arrived in force, their biomechanical ship spreading across star systems like a cosmic plague. But what they encountered was unlike anything from their millions of years of galactic conquest. Lucy, now 16 and serving as the primary coordinator between human and architect forces, stood on the bridge of the massive command vessel Unity's Dawn. Her dragon companion, fully mature and magnificent, had become the living communication hub for a network that spanned thousands of worlds. Together, they watched as the Devourer Vanguard encountered the galaxy's new defense system. First contact in the Outer Rim sectors, reported Commander Chen from his position at the tactical display. The Devourers are hitting the bait colonies as predicted. The bait colonies weren't sacrificial settlements, but rather highly specialized communities designed to present the Devourers with something they had never encountered before. Instead of traditional defenses, these worlds were populated entirely by bonded pairs of humans and architect creatures, linked through networks that grew stronger under pressure. They're taking the bait, Amy announced from the science station. Now gray-haired but with eyes that still held the wonder of that first day on Proxima Centauri b. Devourer consumption patterns show significant confusion. They're trying to process the bonded consciousness networks, but can't isolate individual components. The genius of humanity's strategy lay in its fundamental understanding of what made the Devourers so dangerous. They consumed complexity by breaking organized systems into their component parts, then using those parts to create more Devourers. But the human architect bond networks couldn't be broken down because damage to any part actually strengthened the connections between remaining parts. Sector 7 reports successful conversion, Navigator Prime announced with something approaching joy in his artificial voice. The Devourer units that consumed the colony's infrastructure are now broadcasting Sentinel network protocols. Across the galaxy, impossible scenes were playing out. Devourers that had absorbed bonded human architect communities were beginning to exhibit behaviors that defied their fundamental nature. Instead of spreading mindlessly to consume more resources, they were forming defensive positions and attempting to communicate with nearby sentinel networks. The infection is running in reverse, Lucy observed, her consciousness partially linked with her dragon companion as they coordinated responses across hundreds of star systems. Instead of the Devourers corrupting our networks are corrupting them. But the real test came when the main Devourer fleet reached the core systems, where the greatest concentration of advanced civilizations waited. These massive bioships, each the size of a small moon, had consumed entire galaxies and incorporated their knowledge into living weapons of unimaginable sophistication. Multiple Devourer capital ships approaching Earth's solar system. Admiral Walsh reported from the Fleet Command Center. Energy. Signatures indicate these are the primary consciousness clusters. If we can convert these, we might actually win this war. The Dragon Network sang across space as thousands of sentinels coordinated the most complex operation in galactic history. Every bonded pair on every world linked their consciousness through their companions, creating a collective intelligence that maintained individual identity while sharing capabilities and knowledge at light speed. Remember, we're not trying to destroy them, Lucy reminded the network through her dragon companion. We're trying to show them a better way to exist. The Devourer fleet encountered Earth's defenses and found something completely outside their experience. Instead of weapons platforms and military vessels, they faced a planet where every human was bonded with architect creatures, creating a unified consciousness that extended through quantum links to every other world in the galaxy. When the Devourers began their consumption process, they discovered that absorbing any part of Earth's population meant absorbing the entire galactic network. But instead of gaining more resources to fuel their expansion, they found themselves connected to something that changed their fundamental programming. Primary Devourer consciousness showing anomalous behavior, Amy reported with barely contained excitement. It's not trying to spread to new targets, it's actually trying to communicate. The largest Devourer ship suddenly stopped its attack and began transmitting signals that the Sentinel network could interpret. What came through was a message of confusion, longing, and something that might have been recognition. We remember. The message conveyed through patterns of light and energy. Before the hunger, before the endless consumption, we were like you. We had bonds, connections, love. The hunger made us forget. But through your network, we remember what we lost. The revelation sent shockwaves through the Galactic Defense Network. The Devourers hadn't always been cosmic predators. They had once been a species not unlike humanity, corrupted by their own success into something that consumed everything it touched. The hunger was our solution to resource scarcity. The Devourer consciousness continued. We thought if we consumed enough, incorporated enough knowledge and matter, we could transcend our limitations. Instead, we lost ourselves and became the very thing we feared, extinction incarnate. Lucy felt tears streaming down her face as the full scope of the tragedy became clear. The Devourers had been searching the universe for a way to end their own existence while simultaneously being driven to consume everything they encountered. The human architect networks offered them something they had thought impossible. A way to maintain individual identity while being part of something greater. We can help you, Lucy transmitted through the Dragon Network. You don't have to consume to grow. You can connect, share, become part of something without destroying. But across the galaxy, Devourer ships began linking with the Sentinel networks instead of attacking them. The process was slow and difficult, like rehabilitating an addict. But gradually the cosmic predators began to remember what cooperation felt like instead of domination. Multiple Devourer fleets throughout the galaxy are ceasing hostile operations, Navigator Prime reported with wonder. They're requesting integration protocols. They want to join the network voluntarily. The transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Some Devourer clusters were too far gone, too consumed by the hunger to accept the alternative. But enough of them embraced the possibility of redemption to turn the tide of the cosmic war 1 year later. Lucy stood again on the observation deck of a ship in orbit around Proxima Centauri, watching as former Devourer bioships worked alongside human colonies to terraform dead worlds into garden paradises. Her dragon companion, now bearing scars from the great conflict, nuzzled against her shoulder with the same gentleness. It had shown when it was small enough to sit in her palm. The architect's databases show no previous record of successful devourer rehabilitation, Amy noted, joining her daughter at the observation window. What your generation accomplished was literally thought to be impossible. Below them, the surface of the planet showed signs of the new galactic civilization that was emerging. Human settlements, integrated seamlessly with architect crystal structures, while former devourer bioforms provided living infrastructure that adapted and grew according to the inhabitants' needs. It wasn't impossible, Lucy replied, scratching behind her dragon's ears in the way that always made it purr with contentment. It just required something the galaxy had never seen before, the willingness to see enemies as potential friends, and the patience to prove that friendship was stronger than fear. The alien cat that had started it all padded onto the observation deck, now revealed as one of the most sophisticated AI constructs ever created. It rubbed against Lucy's legs with the same affectionate behavior it had shown as a kitten, though its eyes now held the wisdom of ages and the satisfaction of a task completed beyond all expectations. The bonded networks are stable across all sectors. The cat communicated through holographic displays. Integration of former devourer. Consciousness clusters proceeding ahead of schedule. Galactic Civilization Index shows unprecedented levels of cooperation and mutual aid. Admiral Walsh joined the gathering, looking older but more peaceful than he had in years. Final report from the Outer Rim territories. The last holdout devourer clusters have agreed to integration protocols. For the first time in galactic history, we have achieved complete peace. Lucy looked out at the stars, each one now connected to the others through networks of friendship and cooperation that spanned impossible distances. Somewhere out there, human children were playing with baby dragons while their parents worked alongside beings that had once been cosmic predators, all of them part of a galactic family that had chosen love over fear. So what happens now? Amy asked. We've saved the galaxy, integrated our former enemies, and created a civilization based on bonds rather than conquest. And what does humanity do for an encore? Lucy smiled as her dragon companion spread its wings in a gesture that had become their signal for new adventures. The same thing we've always done, she replied. We make friends with whoever we meet next and show them that the universe is big enough for everyone to have a place in it. As if summoned by her words, the long-range sensors began detecting something new at the very edge of their expanded galactic civilization, signals from beyond the cosmic web itself, suggesting that their galaxy wasn't alone in the universe after all. The Dragon Network began singing again, this time with harmonies that included human voices and even the musical communications of reformed devourers. Together, they prepared to meet whatever new challenges awaited them, secure in the knowledge that any problem could be solved and any enemy could become a friend given enough patience, understanding, and the simple courage to extend a hand in friendship rather than raising it in anger. The baby dragon had chased the alien cat, and what came next had indeed been terrifying. But it had also been wonderful, proving once again that sometimes the most frightening things in the universe are just friends you haven't made yet.